So I'm going to start with those names you find in your family tree. You've got a 5-page handout today available to you, and I'll try to call your attention to some certain things. I did this handout a couple of days ago, and of course, Jan added a few things again. So I'll try to alert you if you're looking at your handout as to where I am. Without further ado, the names you find in your family tree, because every time I think I've found them all, boy, I find a bunch again. This time I found them through DNA lists and some other kinds of lists that are, same surname, families. There's all kinds of things that we're going to talk about. Never, ever leave your ancestor without a surname. Now, I know I've talked about this before, but single first names, whether you're doing paper or you're in a database, they're a real headache. You always think, well, I'll get back to it. I've at least got her first name of Ada. So, and what really happens is we end up with this big long list of single names and we can't remember who to attach them to. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about today is in 5 or 6 slides is what you want to do so that you don't leave an ancestor without a surname. First of all, we've all got families, I think, that do the rinse and repeat routine, like those first names, like each and every boy in each generation being named William Peter, or in my family's case, Michael David, or George Lee, or Patrick Donald, or the famous WD, nope, nothing else, just the initial, and the last name is Jones, for example. Yikes. We need to find their nicknames because they had them. Let me talk about my Michael Davids briefly. I have a brother, Michael David Lee. He is 83 years old. He's only about 5'8", but we call him Big Mike. Now, his son is also Michael David Lee, and we call him Little Mike still, even though he's 6'4". And he has a son, and right now we're calling that kid Mikey to try to separate. But Mikey also has an interesting name in his elementary school. He is called Speedy. Because he's a fast runner. I don't know if that nickname's going to stick or not, but you have these. Find the nicknames. Make sure you record the nickname with your family name so that even if you know what the nickname means or who it is, someone following you will know that. You want to record each of those nicknames. And you're going to find those same things used in gossip columns or stories, or in the case of my brother and his son, in sports columns. So where each family in the same community rinsed and repeated the same names, you betcha, all of them had nicknames, and you need to use that. But you've got to get those people attached in some way to their proper family tree. I've got a friend who says with the rinse and repeat thing, she's got, honest to goodness, a family where all the boys in the family name their first sons after their granddad, first and middle name. And she's just confused. That's a terrible thing. So the case of a missing identity, you never leave a person without a surname. So you can use a first or an initial along with a surname and gender as helps. Or you could use what I call the spousal unit connection. I have resorted to things, where I knew that the last name was Molotov. I've resorted to wife 1 and wife 2 just to get them connected so I didn't lose them. So in my list, they still appear back in the Molotov section, even though I know that they have probably, well, they do, a maiden name, and I just don't have that yet. But I've got them connected some way so I don't get them lost in my huge database of 16,000 people. First, one of the things you can do, and you can even do it right now to amuse yourself, is write down all the surnames you know for both of your parents. Make a list for your mom's side and make a list for your dad's side. See what you can do. And include all of those cousins who married other people and now they have other surnames. Yeah, you'd be surprised. at the surprises that come down to you later on, especially if we're going to look at DNA or surname lists or whatever. Big rule and a reminder, there are no misspellings ever with any name. You regard these as one more surname to investigate and carefully record the misspelling. And you collect all of them, record the date when you found it. I just do a year, like Lee, parentheses, 2024. And then you can annotate your notes to include the source later. But use that list right beside you as you're researching. If you're researching online or you're looking at something, and record them at the top of your family timeline. We've talked, and we will again this year. I'm going to explain some different kinds of family timelines this year later in January. And if you put your name list in that timeline right at the top of it, it's an easy way for you to keep track, especially if you're going elsewhere to do your research. Don't forget to show all of these lists to your family members who told you they don't remember nothing. When they see those names, they start remembering. So you can be a real kickstart for what you're doing with those older family members. Even people sometimes who are in the early stages of Alzheimer's or other memory problems. And of course, if you're going to work with any professional genealogist, and especially professional genealogists over in another country, for example, over in Europe, make sure you provide your surname list immediately. Leave all the names on there, even if you think these names only existed in the United States. Even if you plan to only research one side, for example, the maternal side, and I've told you about a fellow I knew by the name of Stephen here, who only researched his dad's side and thought he was done with his family. Wow. You still need to immediately record the associated names you find on that paternal side, because you may run into some intersections within your family tree. Be aware of and use civil and religious records for both the maternal and paternal sides, and don't put this off. If you're looking at your mom's side, and in the case of my mom, that would be Beck, don't put off looking at the Nanick side, which was my dad's side, and my Cogleiser side there, because while you're looking at newspapers today, a favorite for all of us, you're going to find those interconnections in those gossip columns. So take time and put those names down. You might have other surnames married into that paternal side. Could you find several from one family marrying into your maternal side? I can tell you that my Beck brothers, back 4 generations in Leksvig, Norway, married into 2 families there. And so they were very, very well connected. So be aware of how long families have to have known one another and associate with one another, because you're going to find clues. It's also going to help you in the case of that long lost child that you never knew your cousin had, or in the case of an adoptee that appears in your family, and sooner or later they want to know where they came from. So construct a surname cheat sheet for yourself. Keep those maternal and paternal surnames separate, and begin a list of associated married into surnames on that same sheet. I keep a list at the top of my timeline, as I've said, and I tend my list carefully, adding all surnames found. And this is where, when we begin to talk about DNA lists today, this is where you're just suddenly going to get a bunch. So today, I'll remind you of how to work with the old methods that we all know, the true and tried and true methods, because we know lots of naming traditions in our families, and they have stood the genealogy community very well. And I hope by the end of this talk, you also celebrate new methods, because there's new stuff to learn. For example, in the tried and true, I'm just going to remind you quickly, could that surname have come from a patronymic naming tradition in the Scandinavian countries, for example, and some other places? You'll also find a weird patronymic naming tradition in Wales, and I've talked about that before, so be careful in Wales. Or did that name come from an occupation? like a blacksmith for black, or a carpenter, or a baker, or a miller, or a tailor, and so on. If you're in English-speaking countries and in some European countries, you're going to find lots of these. You may have to translate the last name to get the true meaning, but you will find lots of those. Or place names in Scandinavia and in Europe and in across the world. In fact, you'll find that people might be named for a place name or a place feature. My Beck family comes from that little creek or rill down the Trondheim fjord at Leksvig. They were right beside the little rill, which was called a beck, B-E-C-K or B-E-K. And they said, oh, well, that's good enough. We've been told we have to have a surname. Just right at the time that the second group was coming to the United States, and they adopted that, and it's still there today. The surname could have come from a nickname or a military replacement name in the case, for example, of people who were in the Swedish Army. Sometimes the unit commanders were pretty lazy, and when one person left, they just gave that same name and that surname to another person. So watch that. Or AKAs, also known as these relatives who invent a new name and a background as a criminal. And these AKAs abound for some career criminals. You'll find examples of these on their intake forms from state prisons, and there's virtually all 50 states today have their intake forms out online, so it's kind of fun to go take a look. Many of them, including Montana, for example, on the intake form have a special line for the known AKAs. Many former inmates die under a name change, or they use an AKA, which might involve the name or a similar name, but the dates might change by months or years. You'll still be able to tell who the person is. And of course, you're going to be able to look at news stories, especially beginning in the 20s and 30s, that featured info on career criminals with FBI files that appeared or were known to be in your state or your area. Forgers are especially creative still today, but they were back then too. So they're great at using others' names, not just for their own name, but for the things they do. So here's in the Great Falls Tribune, a person who used the name R.A. Emery. He was the endorsee. And by the way, he appeared in several places in Great Falls on one weekend wearing a brown jacket, brown pants. He had brown hair and a brown hat. 4 checks carried the purported signature of the Crown Jewelry Company here and the purported signature of the late Saul Rothenberg. And 3 other checks were apparently signed by the American Furniture Co. So look at that. He had 3 things going for him. He'd made up his checks numbered, and he had 3 fonts of type used to make them look authentic. And he sure did fool people. And there were several $100s in those days. That was a lot of money that those businesses were out because they gave him money for his endorsed check by R.A. Emery. So if you're looking at a career criminal in your family or in your community, and you're looking at the forger's name, by the way, the last name of the guy, ironically, when they found him, was Brown. You guessed it. But he was R.A. Emery for this purpose. Let's turn our attention to some new vital resources. All of you, or most all of you today that I have down in my list, say that you have done some DNA testing. I've done DNA testing at several companies because of medical things that I needed. But in doing that, these companies are producing some fantastic resources for all of us. So even if you don't test yourself, and we have people who come in this library all the time and say, oh, no, not doing that, not testing DNA, don't want to know, and don't want to cause concerns for somebody who maybe committed a crime in my family. I'd be really nervous or whatever. Be aware that others related to you are testing, and there's clues for you in their results. I have a sister-in-law, a dear sister-in-law, Ethel, who has said no, she won't test. And her three boys, who are the sons of my brother, won't test either. And because it's just foofara and whatever. But it's like I told her, I said, that's okay, Ethel, you don't have to do that because the generations coming down from you have tested. Your grandchildren and your great grandchildren have already tested, and so their results show you, and in a in an indirect way, and they also show my brother that you were married to, and they also show your sons indirectly. She was dumbfounded. Again, name and place lists are vital components of results at any of these sites, at Ancestry or at MyHeritage or at GEDmatch, which is a good free place for you to port your data to so you get even more matches. And that's a free one. Or out at 23andMe or whatever. They all utilize place and name as vital components of their results. If you weren't doing your DNA as well as you do, and I know you guys do, it would make it much more difficult for them. But believe me, even if you believe you've found all the surnames, new to you surnames are going to pop up and they should be noted by you. They can't be noted unless you do more than just look for a few minutes at that site. In the next few weeks in Great Falls, I'm going to be doing some Sunday shows, which just show those features and how to use them. They're just half-hour programs. They're not biggies. But don't ignore it. If you've got a niece-few, that is a niece or a nephew or a child who wants to show you results and names they don't know, pay attention. If they haven't filled out their form very well, and they're just expecting to get results from someone else, they need your help. They need to know what names they should be paying attention to. So help them add surnames and places to their files. On page 1 of my handout, I've given you a surname cheat sheet sample from my paternal and my maternal family. And if you go over to page 3, I'm going to show you names you can find in your family tree if you've done a good job of describing yourself out at your site where you had your DNA selected. So, for example, share your list of known surnames, maternal and paternal, and known geographic locations. I put out my 23andMe list here. I'm the person labeled on the left called you, and I'm compared to a woman known as Peggy. She was an unknown adoptee who showed up in my family tree, and she was looking for information. She knew a little bit, luckily. Now, if you notice on my left side, I've filled out everything, including my maternal grandmother's birthplace in Devil's Lake, Ramsey County, North Dakota. My maternal grandfather's birthplace in Trondheim, Norway. My paternal grandmother's place again in Yalowa, which is actually in Upper Silesia. Today it's described as being in Poland. My paternal grandfather's place in Weeping Water, Cass County, Nebraska. And then all my other ancestral birthplaces that I could think of, just even by country, and my family surnames. I went beyond these and put in more than 40, I believe 41 surnames. Well, I could concentrate then in her list where she only had Heron and Phillips. I could concentrate on that Heron component and know where I should be looking, because she was looking like a first cousin once removed for me. And indeed, she was. Her mom was actually my first cousin, Debbie Heron, who had a child quite early on in her teen years and gave that child up. Now, that person only had those names. She did have names, Heron, because she petitioned the court in Kalispell, Montana, to at least have the court look at the record and tell her the surname, even though she couldn't have the birth certificate. that, by the way, is another avenue for you to explore. And a judge very kindly did that for her because that was the turning point. If I'm looking out now at another site that gives ethnicity information and even more, I'm going to show you this one for my heritage. This is my latest one that came out this week for ethnicity. And if you're looking at my map, you'll see that I've got a circle drawn there on Norway because that's the Trondheim area. And they've been able to actually, at my heritage, take all of my matches plus me and isolate to that area, which is really pretty cool. Now, notice I have Swedish heritage too. I have other Norway heritage. I have some United Kingdom and Ireland heritage that I don't know too much about, but I'm going to explore because I'm still looking for that great grandfather. And notice that there are overlapping areas, green and blue, back in Europe, in the Belarus, Poland, Ukraine area, because I know many of my Polish relatives who are originally stayed in Silesia actually got moved after World War II over into other areas. And so it tells me that they've tested, and I've got some work to do. So the good news is for this map is it absolutely confirms what I've been doing with documents. It absolutely confirms it. It gives me some more ideas for some other places to go. And luckily, I have a list of names that I can use, even if they're down to just a few percentage points of my DNA. I had to read about the latest ethnicity studies so that I could really be aware of what personal maps tell you. Again, every one of these, the one that I will get very soon from Ancestry, I'm hoping will show me a little more about the United Kingdom. It probably won't be as strong in Eastern Europe. It'll probably be just as strong in Norway, I hope. The map will look slightly different because they were using different testing populations. This is why you want to do those tests other places, because the different testing populations are also going to enable you to get to more of those people with new surnames. Remember, you need the surname so that you can go out and look at records and you can find their records going backwards. So you always want to have that surname in place. I've had people say, so what's the big deal with the surname? Well, whatever the person is using is what's going to be used in civil and religious records. So that surname is very important. My ethnicity reported heritage right now says that I'm Scandinavian, and there's a little stopway point underneath that says part of that is from Trondheim. They've been able to scale it right into there. It says I've got Eastern European, Baltic, and some other. So I know I have 11 generations researched in the Trondheim region already. So that confirms my good research. And that's really nice because then I can add this ethnicity report in as one more thing for each one of those people in those generations. And I have 6 generations researched in Silesia / Poland, but only up to World War II. So now I have the means to go look at these people after World War II because it looks like there's enough of them out online now that I'm going to get some hints. So it looks like I have some winter work ahead of me. And some new clothes. I also found from this same report that I knew a whole bunch about my Pennsylvania Coglizer heritage. I mean, I have that down all the way back to 1720s. But I don't know what that circle around Virginia means for me. Could that be a clue about my missing great-grandfather? I need to go after and pursue that because there's enough information about that part of the United States and my linkage, possible linkage to it, that I need to explore that. Let me show you very similarly over at 23andMe. I just got their latest results again. And this is that geographic look, just like we just saw at My Heritage, and they're highlighting roughly the same things. I've got a lot of Scandi. I've got some, but I've also got Finland there. Like, take a look at that. So they've done enough work with the Finnish background so that I can do some more work with that background that I have. I have England. I have some things that I expected in Eastern Europe. And I have this new one called France. And that one tickles me because I think that that's my link finally to be able to find some things in Europe about my liar, liar, pants on fire great grandfather on the Bennett side. Yeah, he took an English name, but I'd hazard a guess there's some other things working there. But notice that this told me immediately what new results were there as a result of all of the new testing populations they have done. I'm not included in their testing population. I just get compared to their very well-known testing population so they can show me what's there. Down at the bottom on the left, it says Belarusian, Polish, and Ukrainian, 14%, and it shows you Upper Silesia. And that's exactly what I would expect from my grandma who came to the United States in 1886 when she was 10 years old, and she came from Upper Silesia. So it's confirming my tree. I really believe that there's enough information here now in these sites that you can do another DNA confirmation of records, at least in certain cases. And you need to stay up to date. If you haven't looked at these sites for a long time, you need to go back and look. If you're in the area here, and you want me to help you look at your results, I can. We can spend an hour confidentially, take a look at your results, and I can show you some of the things that might help you. We do that routinely here in Great Falls at our library all the time. So they've got tools. We don't just have to work with some of the old tools that we've had. At My Heritage, you've got the map that you just saw. You've got the means where they tease it out and tell you approximate percentages right down to a specific location. And they've got another thing called auto clusters, which is an automatic tool that organizes your DNA matches into clusters, all descending from one common ancestor. So you can finally get back to that common ancestor rather than just the most recent common ancestor. They've got a chromosome browser. If you've been tested there and you've been tested out at Ancestry, those will let you see how you're related to one another across your chromosomes. Female and male, paternal and maternal. You will have to tease that last information out because they're not necessarily going to tell you which one's there, but it's pretty easy to do. They have a centimorgan explainer. That's the amount of heritage you share with another mapped on a chromosome browser. The larger the share is, the closer your relationship. That's how I found, or my niece, Carolyn, found us because she was an unknown child that my brother had in a casual relationship. But the CM explainer will show you how you might be related to that person based on the amount of shared DNA and your ages. This is where you could go to a Blaine Bettinger's site and get his chart, which I hope you've already gotten from previous talks. So I didn't show that here today, but I have shown it to you before because it'll tell you when you're looking at these people, if you keep that chart beside you, it will tell you what kind of a relationship it might be and what generation you're related from. These are just super, and they're loaded with surnames as a result. So at 23andMe, they have a different thing, a map that's called an inferred family tree, which points to generations, at least 6 or 7 right around you, and only uses the people who have tested with them, but it will show you that you have a person over in a certain area. They won't tell you who it is, but they'll give you your matches so that you can tease that out for yourself and get the appropriate records. They also have the most fantastic chromosome browser, I think, because you can compare as many as 7 people at once across that tool. And it has health tools. Of course, I've told you before, I went there to that site at the, well, with the help actually of a person, a counselor who helped me with teasing out information as to whether or not my daughter's rare cancer was something that was in my family. It wasn't. Tremendously reassuring, but also a sad event. And then in their inferred family tree, if you at your invitation go out to 4 other viewers, they don't have to belong to 23andMe, but we can share names and surnames there and look at the reports and begin to help all of our family trees. So that's another site that has some free features for you if you utilize it. Ancestry, of course, has some great tools. If I had time, I'd do it today, but I'm already I'm 4 minutes down from where I need to be, but that's okay. But your surname lists and your DNA projects are critical because these surname lists, Ancestry, My Heritage, 23andMe, GEDmatch, FTDNA, all of these, and that's only 4 or 5 of probably 10 that you should be looking at. They all utilize surnames and place locations they expect you to recognize. If you don't recognize them, that's your clue. And that's when you want to go into your matched names and see who you match and where their location is and where they matched in the past, especially if you've been researching your lineage already, or you've got some names. And then you're going to be able to add in the names that they give you on your own DNA project, because now you've gained some other names that you know are interrelated with your family history. It's never going to be done. Isn't that great? I think it is. I need 30 more years, but I don't think I'm going to get them. So DNA sites still depend, no matter what, on rock solid genealogy research, because they add generations up and down in your family tree. They'll even show you hints of ancient origins based on some pretty neat data out of some European sites that have worked with this. And if you haven't seen the latest information about some of this and an earbone availability of within ancient skulls that they're using, please read about this. They add current surnames we don't know about right now. They show family mysteries. Maybe that adoptee, like my niece, that new child you didn't know about, like my niece, or that person who disappeared and popped up elsewhere. Because I have a fellow by the name of Hector with a Hispanic last name, and he popped up as a first cousin once removed in my heritage. And I said, I don't have any known Spanish or Hispanic names. What's going on? Well, when we investigated, we found out that the person that gave his heritage was only probably 4 years old when she disappeared from my little community of Ferndale, Montana. In the middle of the night, her mom took her elsewhere, and she popped up elsewhere in California, married his father, and so now I have Hector's name in there. If you have got a telephone on, you need to get it off and someone is not muted. Again, you're going to want to go look at the parentage and relationship estimates and see Blaine Bettinger's work and his simple charts. We've done these before and they can really help you. My Coglizer family surname collection I've shown you before. This is what I got in one weekend by looking at the Pennsylvania archives in books right here in the library, although it's also available online now. I could look at other connected surnames, before 1905, which is what I personally chose because I wanted to know the really, really old connections, still trying to work my way back to them. And when I got to that first Coglizer entry in my Coglizer timeline in 1729, the first one I found, there was a ship arrival from Cowes, England via Rotterdam. going to Philadelphia. And a group came from Schwarzenau, Germany originally. They were known as Dunkards. That's a German Baptist affiliation of brethren. There were 59 Palatines, and whoo, baby, in my family, there were all of these people, the Calclosers, Coglizers, Cadclesers, Calglassers, all of them interrelated, by the way. That's only 2 and possibly 3 families traveling together, and they were a bit casual about how they spelled that name, but that's to be expected in that time frame. I was thrilled when I found these in 2001. If you're hunting for female maiden names and surnames, you have to ask what surname was she born under or her maiden name. What did she use after her first marriage, her second marriage? Did she have even more marriages that she didn't even tell you about? Did she change her name legally at any other point? In the newspapers right now, out at the Cascade Courier in our area, there's literally 2 or 3 people every week who are changing their name back to a maiden name or another name simply because they did not get that done, didn't think to do it in a divorce procedure. You can look at them and see those names. It's interesting. You want to know her siblings. You don't want to just research her because you hope that there's a brother there with the original surname. And you're going to look to find that surname on birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates. Be prepared for surprises because believe me, there will be. I have an Aunt Margaret Norma who stunned us all, and we'll show you that in a few minutes. So back to that case of a missed identity in that person with no surname. Always use a surname of some type. If all I know is Goldenstein for the male in the family, his wife can be Mrs. if nothing else, or Miss Goldenstein, or if I've got 3 of them, or 2 girls, I can say Miss Goldenstein 1 and Miss Goldenstein 2, or Master Goldenstein for the little boy that I never knew his name, but he died. Or I can use female Goldenstein or girl Goldenstein or male or whatever, but investigate the surname at DNA sites because this is where you might find some of those surnames. When I haven't found a maiden name, I still record that lady. Always, always, always. I don't want her to appear as a single name like Ada. So I'm going to make her appear with her husband's last name, but with her title or what she was, like Nannick wife. Jeanette was a wife to a Nannick. Or if there are lots of Nannicks, and I have lots of them, Nannick Joe wife, Jeanette. But she's always going to appear then in my Nannick or Nannick list until I get that maiden name. And once I get the maiden name, I take the chance, if I haven't found a previous nickname, I still put in that person or what I had originally put her with in Nannick because I don't want to lose her. These are indirect methods and indirect identities I can pursue through records, and I'm going to pursue her husband's records to find her records. Knowing those naming traditions, of course, are an essential skill. The patronymics, especially being used in so many cultures, Scandinavian countries, Scotland, Wales, and so on. Interesting. They're just a component of a personal name based on the given name of one's father or a grandfather or an earlier male ancestor. So Johansson, which is what my great-great-grandfather was when he came to this country, even though when he signed out of Lexvig, he used Beck, but he used both of them. It was kind of nutty to find him in Minnesota, but find him I did because I looked in those censuses first to see what he was using now in the United States. It's going to depend on some circumstances too. Your person, if they went back and forth, because many of these people traveled back and forth to their original country before they finally settled in the United States, alternated using their new surname with a former patronymic depending on the circumstances. My great-grandfather, Andrew Beck, used Johannesson, he used Beck when he left Norway the first time in 1872. When he came back in 1875, because his wife was lonesome for her parents, he alternated using Beck and Johansson for 6 years. Found him both ways in Norway. But when he and his family left Norway again in 1881, the government there was looking for people who could be conscripted into the army. So he used Johannesson to avoid possible conscription into the Norwegian army because Beck would have been a new name to them. Several weeks later, back in Wilmer, Minnesota, he was just plain old Andrew Beck. When you search for evidence of a person, make sure you know those surname traditions so you're not wasting your time when you look for documents from other countries, because those patronymics are going to be used thoroughly in the religion records in any Lutheran centered populations in Europe and in certain Catholic traditions, for example, in Italy. So research how your ancestor first used her patronymic when she came to the US. Did she change right away? I bet she didn't. But she changed within a year or two based on what she perceived would be the very best thing. This goes for both males and females, but I kind of like to use her here. Record any informal or formal changes you see in the gossip columns, especially in church membership records, because remember, those Lutheran records are all available out online, and those are going to be a big benefit to you. And Italy records now are available out online, and they are parish records, so they're going to be a benefit to you. Did she get a nickname? My mom, when she came to the United States from Canada, and she was a US citizen, she just lived up in Canada for a few years, but down in Havre, Montana, I only find her as Becky Beck. Her name is Inez, but she went to nursing school in Havre, and they promptly said, you need to have a nickname. So she was Becky. Research siblings to see how they each use their surname tradition. I've got lots of Quist relatives, Rob Quist being one of them, but it's interesting to see how that surname got used when it first came to the United States. Two brothers came, my Andrew Quist came, and he just used Quist. But his brother Nels, living in the same community, used Rosenquist. I don't know why, but they were brothers in the same community in Minnesota. Remember, if you're researching Spanish or Hispanic connections, that maiden name still is, and is going to be a great ancestral clue for you. I'm showing you Camila Hutres Garcia, who married Javier Castro Herrera, and she could be known as Camila Hutres Garcia de Castro, meaning took her husband's name at the end, or Camila Hutres de Castro, or she might keep her original name. She's got all those choices. So you've got things to do when you're looking at those records still today. I would personally look at the marriage records first, if at all possible, because they are quite clear. So plan for brick walls and use a database. I'm using Roots Magic 11. I know of others who are using Family Tree Maker, the latest. Others are using Legacy. They're all very similar, but here's the one thing again they have in common. They keep your information private on your database. Remember, if you share your database out places, plan to see others do takeoffs of it. And you need to be very, very careful of that. If you've worked really hard, as I have, to prove every fact in my ancestry, or to show the things I have not proven, then I'm pretty careful with whom I share. I do have a couple of cousin bait things out there, very small at Ancestry, and I've got a larger one just for Scandinavian ancestry out at My Heritage after they contacted me and said, will you do it and open it to a certain number of us? Because remember, I worked really hard in those first years in 2001, 2002, 2003. I researched 40 Oles in the Lexvig tiny area to find my direct line. And yes, he was Ole, but it really took a lot of work to search through carefully the church records to see which one was mine. And it all came down to my confusion, nothing else. I just didn't know enough about Scandinavian names at that point, or that families used the name again if a child died. And that's what happened in the case of my direct line. I'd seen a little Ole in the 1801 census, and he was two. So I assumed those couldn't, that couldn't be my family. Silly me. I didn't look at the death records till a long time later, and he died just a year or two later, listed in the death records. And yes, his parents were my direct ancestors. So I think a database is essential, whether you're on paper or not. You're going to have lots of binders if you're on paper, and that's good. If that's what's comfortable to you, then you use that. But I use an electronic database to keep track of the children, grandchildren, everyone. I love Roots Magic because it lets me put in families that aren't connected yet, but I can connect them if I want to. I've just got a lot of relentless detective work that I've performed in order to make sure of my database. And I still catch myself every once in a while and have to backtrack. It's a fact for all of us. So get help from your local genealogy society down there in Billings or in Bozeman or here in Great Falls or over in Kalispell or down in California, all the different places where you are, and find others who are using that methodology you prefer. Maybe it's Family Tree Maker. It might be Roots Magic. Maybe it's paper. Ask how they manage their genealogy projects and gain information from them about how to make your life easier. If you're interested, by the way, in any of these databases, Roots Magic 11 is what I'm using, and Legacy, and you're interested in managing your genealogy project without tears and frustration, and you've been on paper, then let me know, and perhaps I can help you in just a private little Zoom session or something. Let me show you what people do. Here's my Aunt Margaret Norma Steele. Her name originally was Margaret Norma Lee. This is her Social Security information that Social Security had, okay? That she had used Margaret Norma Steele. She'd used Margaret N. Steele. And that was in 1990 and 1974 when she was thinking about retiring. But she never let them know that she had used another name, Margaret N. Heron, which she used for 37 years. She was a beautician. She had a beauty shop. Cash only, please. I'll leave you to that one. Wow. Or the relative who used the step-parent's surname. There's going to be problems if they've used that, even if they say, but I've always used that name. I just used it. We never went through a formal adoption. It just occurred. And I've got lots of papers to show who I am. Well, you're going to have to show those if you want a passport or you want to prove what you've done. You're going to have to look carefully at things. So find Social Security evidence of the alternative use, and you're going to find some paperwork, or you're going to perform some paperwork. I had to perform that paperwork because I did not know. My dad on my birth certificate spelled my name Jeanette and my middle name as Denise with a C. You'd think they wouldn't care about that, but boy, I had to write a real rationale. So go back through the censuses, record what they're actually using, get the step person surname for sure. For my grandpa, he used Eskew until he was in his mid-20s. And then suddenly he went to court and changed his name to Lee. I'm fortunate that I've got his paperwork. Here's another one that I found not long ago here in Great Falls when I was looking through some affidavits. This is the U.S. Department of State. It's an affidavit regarding a change of name for a fellow by the name of Richard Lawrence O'Brien, that he assumed that name on May 28, 1955. That's when his mom got married a second time. His original name was Richard Lawrence Kimball. And here we go. Here's his mom writing that he'd always used it. And he had to go through way more than I did with the Department of State. I at least only had to write a paragraph. This is just the top half of 2 pages of paperwork that he had to fill out, plus a written explanation. So if you know that there are families who are rather casual about that, be aware of it, because you may find name changes. See, even if we want to go to Canada today, we have to have a passport.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing you can look at is, for example, family tree DNA, FTDNA, has a surname, lots of surname projects. In fact, they have over 12,000 surname projects where you can look through and say, how has that name, or who has used that surname through the years? And they let you look at those surname projects for free. So it's a good place for you to go to look for evidence of the use of an unfamiliar surname for you. Enough said. One name projects can also help. I've given you the FTDNA group project site here, and I think I included it on my handout. So on the handout, you should have it. And that should not be a problem for you. But you're going to want to look there for those surname projects. And then there are separate things out there called one name projects. These one name projects happened a long time ago when we still didn't have the benefit of the internet. And people would say, well, bakers, it's all got to come from one family. Or hopefully for mine, Coglizer, it has to come from one. So far, that has not been true. So you're going to want to look at these. Wikitree.com has lots of these projects. I did not put this in your handout, so you might want to copy just at least wikitree.com if you're looking at the one name projects, because you can look and start a one name study if you want to out there and just see who else has done a one name study of your family. Many times I can tell you these people discovered they are not related. Sometimes they find out that small subsets are, because they've done their DNA. So DNA, looking at those surnames, becomes very valuable again when you look at one name studies. So in wrapping up, I can tell you that ancestor seeking season is on 24/7 and 365 days, even if none of us did it during the summer. Families come with surnames. They come with venerated first names where you say, how many times can you use William or John or Jonathan or Joseph or Mary or Susan? Anyway, you're going to find names used generation after generation, and you're lucky if you do, because they are naming patterns for you. Don't ignore those. Look at those across the cousins, because that's only going to be how you begin to tease those out, along with other extraneous information, like, for instance, DNA, because enough of their families will have done the DNA that it's going to make clues for you. Record each one carefully. Record their person's name throughout their life. Make sure you get the first, the middle, the surname, the maiden name, the AKAs, and very occasionally you may find, along with the Catholic Church, that they thought it was important that there was a saint name. That's no longer so important, but up to about 1920, it was. So you might see that. You might see that somebody took another name because they didn't like their first name.